Thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us. 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, but to the point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hey, happy Wednesday to you and yours. On tonight's Mark Steyn show, the cost of living is actually the cost of what the experts have done to us. So Christopher Chope is here to talk about a most interesting bill of his. And also we have censorship. Censorship, it's everywhere, from people you've never heard of. Plus, your thoughts live and in real time, so do send them along by email to gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can Twitter me at gbnews. First, as always, the news with Tamsin Roberts.
Mark, thank you. Good evening from the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson says he's confident he has the right agenda for the country as he faced questions over the cost of living. The Prime Minister insists the UK is better placed than it was during the economic crises of the 80s and 90s. It's as the cost of our food shop went up 3.5% last month, according to the latest figures from the British Retail Consortium. Boris Johnson says he thinks the future is bright.
The best future for the country is get through the tough patch that we have now, support people in any way that we can. But remember, this is we're now seeing a lot of employment and people in high-wage, high-skilled jobs. That's a much better position to be in than we were in the 1980s or 1990s.
The government says it won't appeal a court decision that it acted unlawfully when it moved patients to care homes during the COVID pandemic. A judicial review last month, launched by families of 2 care home residents who died of the virus, found several policies on moving the elderly into care homes had been introduced unlawfully. It found the government hadn't considered that people without symptoms could spread the virus. Ukraine's defence ministry says Russia is attempting to increase its offensive in the east of the country. Kyiv says Moscow's artillery fire and airstrikes are continuing on steelworks in Mariupol, where hundreds of people are still believed to be sheltering in bunkers. In Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city, Russian shelling has bombarded an amusement park, with one woman suffering shrapnel wounds. Ukraine's defence says the Kremlin had conducted nearly 50 airstrikes already this week.
The Russian military command is attempting to increase the tempo of its offensive operation in eastern Ukraine. To this end, the enemy is conducting a regrouping and reinforcing of its troops and is building up its system of fire attack and material technical support.
Russian businesses are being banned from using British accountants under new sanctions. The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says the measures are designed to cut off Russian access to the UK service industry. Meanwhile, the EU will stop importing Russian oil as part of a 6th sanctions package against Moscow. European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen says crude oil supplies will be phased out in 6 months and refined products by the end of the year. The shirt worn by Diego Maradona when he scored 2 of the most famous goals in football history has been sold for a record £7.1 million. He wore Argentina's number 10 shirt in the 1986 World Cup quarter-final against England in Mexico. He scored 6 minutes into the second half in what would become known as the Hand of God goal. England midfielder Steve Hodge kept the shirt after the match and put it up for auction after 19 years. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now let's get straight back to Mark Steyn.
Thank you, Tamsin. What was it Tamsin said? 2 of the most famous goals in football history? Yeah, that's That's one way of putting it. Are you familiar with chaos theory? It was all the rage a few years back. Edward Lorenz famously posited that a faraway butterfly could flap his wings in Brazil, and weeks later that would set off a tornado in Texas. And all the Texans are standing around going, whoa, where the hell did that come from? That seems to be the way we're doing this entirely unforeseen cost of living crisis. Whoa, where the hell did that come from? If you're in Lubbock or Laredo, you can be forgiven for not noticing a butterfly in Brazil minded to give his wings a flap. But that's not what's going on here and now. The cost of living is more accurately the cost of lockdown. The butterflies of our Politico media expert class flapped their wings 2 years ago, and now we are reaping the whirlwind. So here's chaos butterfly Susanna Reid on Good Morning Britain this week, battering the Prime Minister because people can't afford to eat and heat.
Elsie is 77. She's a widow and she's a pensioner who lives in a council house. She receives a pension of £170 a week. Her energy bills have gone, get this, from £17 a month to £85 a month.
Yeah.
She will pay an additional £816 a year. To cut down on spending, Prime Minister, Elsie has now resorted to eating one meal a day. She's 77 years old. She's losing weight. She goes to the supermarket at the end of the day to buy yellow sticker discounted items. She gets up early in the morning to use her Freedom bus pass to stay on buses all day to avoid using energy at home. What else should Elsie cut back on, in your opinion?
I don't want Elsie to cut back on anything. Let's talk about Elsie and what we're doing. And just remind you that the 24-hour Freedom bus pass was something that I actually introduced, just parenthetically.
Marvellous. So Elsie should be grateful to you for her bus pass.
Wow, good Lord. Maybe we could just pick a mini roundabout on the edge of the industrial park somewhere and have the entire population riding around on buses with their Freedom bus pass, going around in circles all day long. I wouldn't mind this kind. It's very rare that I have any sympathy for Boris Johnson because we were at The Spectator together long ago, so I know him too well in that respect. But I could take this kind of media nitwittery if this very same presenter, Susanna Reid, on the very same show, Good Morning Britain, hadn't been one of the leading cheerleaders as the weeks turned into months, turned into years for more and more lockdown, harder and harder lockdown, longer and longer lockdown.
Nobody could have watched that press conference without thinking, hang on a moment, didn't 10 days ago Boris Johnson say a lockdown shouldn't happen in the House of Commons when Sir Keir Starmer had said we need to have
Boris Johnson didn't just...
Yeah, we need more lockdown, harder lockdown. Give it to me even tougher and more miserable. And now, having flapped their wings and demanded 2 years to flatten the curve, these same geniuses are now surprised that we've flattened everything instead. Crippled businesses, disrupted supply chains, ruined entire sectors of the economy. Oh, and now we're stunned that inflation is back and we're headed to the 1970s. But it's a subtly different 1970s. It's like a 1970s after you've spent the 1960s sitting in your bedsit all alone because of the Hong Kong flu. Oh, let's do something no one's ever done. Let's shut down the economy. Oh, what's this? Inflation? How did that cost of living? How did that happen? In Good Morning Britain world, this is why most of the media is complete rubbish, because in Good Morning Britain world, everything exists in isolation. On the one hand, we've had like 2 years of COVID. I'm getting a bit bored with it. Can we have something else? Or how about a war in the breadbasket of the world against an enemy that supplies a huge percentage of the West's oil and gas? Oh, yeah, okay. And then, on the other hand, completely unconnected, have you seen the price of petrol and the cost of a loaf? Gee, I never saw that coming. Fortunately, Even in COVID chaos theory, some things never change, so it's still all the Prime Minister's fault. Let me know what you think. We're going to be talking about it a little more on the oil and gas front a bit later in the show. GBviews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at gbnews. Ruled by experts. How's that working out for you? What are the experts saying now? Let's see. The Danish author of a new study in The Lancet says the data show a, quote, danger signal of vaccine heart deaths. Then we have this. A new study by US government researchers show COVID vaccines impair your immune response by comparison with the immune systems of unvaccinated people. By now you're probably saying, enough of these Americans and Danes. Why don't we ever talk about fellas closer to home? Well, Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, says it's, quote, offensive to raise the subject of UK vaccine side effects, and if you do, you're, quote, an anti-science extremist. Oh, thanks for that, Mr. Streeting. Very helpful. Here's the chap he was talking about.
Mr. Speaker, does my right honourable friend accept that there is another NHS treatment disaster in the making, in the fact that there may be 10,000 or more people who have suffered serious injury or even death as a result of adverse reactions to the COVID-19 vaccinations? And that can he give us assurance that there will be justice for these people immediately rather than having to wait for decades?
Very weak link, and Sir Christopher's normally better than that. I think that's a poor effort from him.
I'm glad it's all a joke to that wigless speaker. Christopher Chope, the member for Christchurch, and the man pushing a new bill on adverse effects from the vaccine, joins me now. So, Christopher, it's weird. Whenever you broach this topic, the principal response is like that of the Speaker and of the Shadow Health Secretary, in that they just basically don't want to talk about this subject at all. So they don't want to get us the data so we can judge for ourselves. And at the same time, they don't want to do the right thing by the people who have been adversely affected by these vaccines.
That I think is a fair summary of my experience. And indeed, I went to see the vaccines minister about 10 days ago. And the first question I put to her was whether the government now accepted that, sadly, as a result of COVID-19 vaccinations, some people had lost their lives. And I expected her to accept that because it's a fact. But instead of accepting it, there was a silence. And I said, well, why are we not getting an answer on this? Because already across the country, a number of coroners have, in inquests, reached the decision, the conclusion, that people have died as a direct result of vaccination. And the health secretary had told me on another occasion that the government accepted the decisions of the coroners. So it was extraordinary that the vaccines minister herself doesn't yet seem to accept the sad reality that vaccines have, for some people, caused significant damage, and for a very few have caused their deaths.
Yes, it's interesting, as you say, no one wants to talk about it. Even, for example, in the case of that poor BBC lady, I think in the Manchester area, the BBC presenter who died, and the coroner, as you said, ruled that the vaccines had played a role in her death, and the BBC itself still doesn't want to talk about one of their own who was felled by this thing. But I get all the time people emailing things about they've sent in the yellow cards and all the rest of it, and the system itself doesn't actually seem to be working. It's almost as if they don't want us to have a sort of monthly roll call of what the cost is, so that they appear to be slow walking this thing deliberately.
Well, I think that's a very fair comment. In fact, the journalist you're talking about was from Newcastle. She used to work for BBC Radio in in Newcastle. The fact that neither her case, her widower's case, or a whole lot of others have yet been dealt with is a serious indictment of the government, because some of these cases go back for more than a year, and as of today, not a single one of the 1,300 plus cases that have been put forward for recompense under the vaccine damage provisions, not one of those cases has been assessed or been decided. And the meeting I had with the minister, she has assured me that the process of assessing these cases will now begin on the week beginning the 16th of May, and that they will deal with 1,800 such applications each year. So there is some light at the end of the tunnel, but it's absolutely unacceptable that the people have had to wait for so long. And it's also, in my view, unacceptable that the government is forcing people who are widows and widowers to go through the ordeal of having to provide further evidence when there's already adequate evidence arising from the coroner's verdicts.
Absolutely. What you're being told, though, is at a certain level complete rubbish. I mean, this is a situation now. We live in a country where at the end, by sort of lunchtime the following day, they can tell you how many people died of COVID the previous day. But if it's something like an adverse effect to a vaccine, that's something they need to sit on and investigate and look into for a year and a half. That's nonsense, surely.
Well, it is, and it's been very difficult to get any information asking parliamentary questions. And the MHRA, which is the regulatory body designed to try and promote the safety of vaccines and other medicines, they produced a statement saying that it was likely that a lot of these heart problems had arisen because of COVID vaccines. And I asked, therefore, for the evidence which led them to that conclusion. And I've been waiting for more than 2 months now to get a reply to what was a parliamentary question. When the session ended, that question fell. But the answer to it must be available, but it's being denied to me and to other people who are interested.
That's a matter of politics rather than science. And I wonder what you think the underlying cause of that is. Is there a great reluctance, not just by ministers, but by the broader public health community, that if the later this gets out, the better it is for them, because they don't want to admit that parts of the last 2 years at least were a mistake that we should not have plunged headlong into? That's essentially a political calculation?
Yes, and it's political calculation, and the public health agenda has been to maximise the number of people being vaccinated, and they've been absolutely terrified that there would be a vaccine hesitancy, and that would be caused by people finding out that vaccines weren't always absolutely safe. And of course, what's happened now is that people are finding out through social media, through their own contacts. And the result of that is that the incidence of people taking booster vaccines after they've already had 2 doses is significantly reduced compared with the numbers who've been fully vaccinated with the first 2 doses. And that's because people in the end find out what's happening in the real world. And sadly, people are finding out that these vaccines have caused significant damage for a group of people, numbering thousands, if not tens of thousands.
You've been a very restrained voice on this, and yet you've been denounced by parliamentary colleagues as an anti-science extremist. You've erred on the cautious side. You said there are officially, I think it's officially over 2,000 deaths, but that as it's a passive reporting system, the likelihood is that there's actually a lot more than that.
Absolutely, and indeed the MHRA made a plea a few years back for more people to fill in their yellow cards reporting, because they said not enough cards were coming in. And they estimated at that stage that probably only 10% of adverse reactions were being recorded. Well, now, if one extrapolates that and applies it to COVID-19, then obviously the numbers will be very much higher. But now they're saying, well, those principles we enunciated a couple of years ago don't apply in the case of COVID-19, but they don't say why, and they don't say what principles do apply.
No, and I would like to get this, as I said, there's no reason not to get this data in more or less real time, and you shouldn't have to wait to read a Danish study in the Lancet and try and figure out, oh, maybe that's happening over here too. Thank you very much, Sir Christopher, and we are all grateful to you. We cannot have a politics of the last 2 years where we do not live in truth and we just agree to accept the official narrative, no matter how obviously gamed that system is. So you're doing great stuff on that, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us again. Let me know what you think. GBviews at gbnews.uk. You can tweet me at GBnews. We will get to your reaction next. Plus more on what's causing the cost of living crisis and censorship. There's more and more stuff they don't want you talking about. The government and the opposition and the media all say, stick to Ginger Growler Gate. That's within the approved parameters of public discourse. But we scoff at ginger growlers and plough our own furrow. All that straight ahead.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christys.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Coming up on Dan Wootton Tonight, as the Labour leader's lockdown antics come back to bite him. Dan will sit down with the men who have blown apart the scandal that could bring down Keir Starmer. Richard Holden, the Durham MP, putting the pressure on local police to re-examine what happened that night. And political firebrand Lawrence Fox, who first released the damning video. It's a special Beers for Keir investigation by Dan Wootton Tonight, airing Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hey, let's get to your take. John says, for 2 years, we've been treated like lab rats in an experimental trial in mental and economic self-harm. Billions have been wasted on useless PPE, which we can't even burn to keep ourselves from dying of hypothermia in case it kills the planet. Oh, yeah. Don't, whatever you do, think of burning a big pile of your COVID masks to keep yourself warm at home, because they'll release all those microplastics that will destroy the planet. So the responsible thing to do is to put that mask on your face and inhale all the microplastics and kill yourself. That will be much better for the planet, John. Thank you very much for raising that important point. Bob says, in response to my thing that the cost of living is the cost of lockdown, he says, no, inflation and growth set to be worse for the UK compared to the G7. But Boris drove a JCB. Do you know something? Everything has changed in the course of my lifetime. There are entire genres of entertainment that are no longer really in existence. We don't really have westerns or musicals anymore. We don't have variety shows on TV. There's all these genres just somehow fall by the wayside, and then suddenly it's all about superheroes flying through the sky. Yet the lamest genre in the history of entertainment, the political photo op, somehow lingers on. Does anyone really want to see Boris Johnson in a JCB like he's Bob the Builder? You know, why didn't Keir Starmer say about Beergate that in fact he was doing a photo op to boost the beer industry? Why didn't Ginger Growler Girl say that she was... I don't even want to... Can't even be bothered getting into that. David says, we have the cost of the war in Ukraine and the sanctions that further impoverish the British people, which is the whole point after all. Yeah, Joe Biden has been trying to plant this sort of phrase in the language that the increased price of petrol or gas, as these American rebel colonists like to say, gas, the increased price of gas at the pump is because of Vladimir Putin. Well, why is that? Oh, because we imposed the sanctions on him to cripple Russia, and instead they're crippling us. Ah, right. Funny how that works, isn't it? Okay, it's one thing to be censored by the state or by Facebook or YouTube or by moronic Brit coppers shamefully knocking on your door because they don't like your tweet. But what about when you're censored by forces you've never even heard of? Do you know what an ISP is? That's an internet service provider. Yeah, we all do, sort of. It's one of those boring hoops you need to jump through in order to roam the World Wide Web. But once you're up and roaming, you sort of assume you're roaming the same World Wide Web as everybody else. But not if your ISP is something called 3, and you're a fan, as I am, of the Conservative Woman website. If you use that particular ISP, 3's company, but the Conservative Woman's a crowd. Yeah, look at that. That's what you get. That's what customers of 3 were faced with if they tried to access the spirited journalism of the Conservative Woman. Oh, so it says secure connection failed. That sounds something boring and technical, like a misconfiguration of your SSL certificate or some such. No. The anonymous, shadowy, dark forces behind the blandly named 3.co.uk decided to place the Conservative Woman on the same blocked list as hardcore pornographers and the like. We asked 3 to explain why they did this to the Conservative Woman, and they sent us the following statement. As with all MNOs, 3 is required to follow regulations that block websites that are classed as containing adult content. By adult content, they mean adolescent content, which is generally sexual type stuff. The responsibility for the guidelines and reviewing of websites is managed by the British Board of Film Classification, and 3 implement their decisions following their review on whether a website contains adult content. We are currently clarifying the status of conservativewoman.co.uk from BBFC and are awaiting feedback from them. Best Bethan. Okay? I've never met Bethan. So we're not friends. We're not on a first name basis. So I'd like to know Bethan's surname. But with the laughably misnamed customer service that you get from the ISP3, you don't really know who Bethan is, do you? But for the moment, 3 appear to have backed down and the Conservative woman is accessible again. That's because the site's founder is not someone to pick a fight with, but there are lessons for all of us here, especially if you're a customer of 3. And Kathy Gingell, the founder of the Conservative woman, joins us now, and we're always glad to see her. Kathy, their argument is that you've got lots of adult content. So I take it that the Conservative woman is the one-stop shop if you want to see transgender bestiality or whatever you've got going on there. Is that what your site's been about all these years?
I'd like to reassure viewers that we don't have sort of strange, sad, idiotic Tory MPs working for us, sort of secretly putting their porn on our website. No. The real irony is, and it actually made me laugh, we're the Ultimate Family Values website. I mean, you couldn't make this up, Mark. I mean, you know, my drug legalizer sort of trolls and critics would consider me the sort of reincarnation of Mary Whitehouse. I mean, so how the British Board of Film Censors compliance officers, yes, of course, they're compliance officers, in their wisdom, judge our content to be adult, beggars belief. Of course, we're grown up. We're not infantile. But the interesting definition is something called harmful content. Well, you know, you can define harmful content anyway, can't you? If it suits you and you don't like what we're doing, which is to actually make sure young people think and have ideas and are better educated for reading our website than going on the MSM.
Yeah, it's interesting. You actually are adult content in the sense that you write about what is happening in the world, and a lot of it is crazy. And when you report on the craziness, they seem to have concluded that is somehow dangerous to people. Now, are you actually confident that 3 won't do the same thing to you again? Because these are all weaselly people, and we know that the real harmful word in your name is conservative, and that that's the sort of thing that woke interns think have to be repressed.
Yeah, no, I'm not confident at all. In fact, like you, I'm a lot more educated 5 days later than I was 5 days ago about internet service providers and so on. There is one thing, there's a sort of free market in them. I think I've identified about 10 of them so far. Unfortunately, 2 others use the British Board of Film Censors to do their adult monitoring. So that doesn't fill me for great hope. I think it's O2 and Vodafone. And who knows, they might be blanking us out now until users, readers, contact us and say, why do I get this notice on my screen? We don't know there's a problem, and because we're only 3 or 4 people. Oh, by the way, our all-woman team too. I mean, you really couldn't make this up. We're an all-woman team. I mean, you know, we've got a devout Catholic as well as the original co-editor. I mean, it beggars belief, but anyway, no, I'm not confident. But everyone has to really understand how this works out more, and I understand better now. And you have to make a big fuss, and you have to name and shame relentlessly. I don't know what else you do. Otherwise, we all end up being pamphleteers because they'll unperson us.
Yeah, no, and that's clear. And I would, that's really a proper response to Bethan at 3 is, why do you hate women so much? Why are you trying to prevent people accessing an all-woman website? Is this part of the internet's war on women? You need to shove it back down your throat. You say there are lots of these ISPs. One of the problems is that actually there's been a consolidation of the internet infrastructure over the last 20 years, and there's actually it's a lot harder now to say, well, nuts to that guy, we're gonna go with another fella. But every time, I mean, people really need to be aware of this. It's not like Twitter announcing that they've taken your tweet down, which you know all about. It's now just some guy, some 12-year-old woke intern, just like pressing a button, and suddenly people can't get to your website and don't even know why, and they assume it's just a technical thing. That's what I don't like about it.
they assume it's our error, but also people aren't techie enough. So we keep, at the moment, I spend a lot of time answering emails saying, turn off your computer, reboot. There's me giving technical advice. It's sort of pretty amazing, because these things, unless you clear something called your cache, which I'm sure the Growler and all these other people know about clearing their caches, but we have to do it on their computer. So we have a little effect. And so people can still not get the damn thing for 5 more days because they don't know how to clear their cache or reboot their computer. And 3 stuff, blocking doesn't go away until they've rebooted. I mean, the whole thing's a nightmare. So, and this is all wasted time. We should be applying our critical minds to much more important things than these technical things. But it's scary because this is how they're going to unperson people like you, people like me. And it is unpersoning because we're disappeared. We're wiped off. We don't exist anymore. Somebody else.
That's very true. I'm amazed to hear you talking about rebooting your computer and clearing your cache. You should actually open your own ISP. What was that thing you managed to mention the Growler in there as well?
Let me do a shout out.
Yeah, carry on, Kathy.
Who's my web mistress. Without her, we'd be lost. We wouldn't exist. Everybody needs Emma, I Know the Net. She's amazing. She educates me daily and saves our site daily. They're basically 3 of us, and I just do want to give a big shout out to her. Sorry.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Kathy. And you heard what the Conservative woman readers, you heard what Kathy said. Clear out your cache. And if you're saying after the last 2 years, I'm cleared out of all my cache, I got nothing, that's not the cache she's talking about. Always great to see you, Kathy. Let's stick with the issue of censorship on the internet. There's going to be a lot more of it here under the pseudo-conservative government's new online law, which is all about, as Kathy was just saying, things that are harmful. Lots of harmful things, by the way, are completely legal, but we have an interesting new standard here because we're moving into a world beyond law. We have a preview of what's headed our way from the current Australian election. One Nation is a political party down under, and they ran the following cartoon about the highly relevant topic of mail-in ballots and voter fraud. For non-Australians, the guy in bed is Albo.
You just need to stay here. Oh, and I brought you these.
Oh, thanks, Penny. I love Sudoku.
No, these are postal votes, under the names of dead people, fake identities. Some were stolen out of letterboxes.
Oh, really? But isn't that illegal?
Oh, Albo, relax.
So how did you get Toto on the Electoral roll?
Easy. The Australian Electoral Commission don't require ID.
Really?
Of course not. That would be racist.
Oh, yeah, no, of course.
That would be that's pretty funny. No, it's not. Not to the Australian Election Commission. Just as in Chairman Xi's China or Kim Jong-un's North Korea, you are not allowed to mock the Australian Election Commission. So Facebook, Instagram, TikTok swung into action and had that cartoon removed. Alexandra Marshall joins us from the Specky down under. Alexandra, it's weird, it's totalitarian touchiness, isn't it?
Look, those ads have been an absolute joy throughout the election. We've had many of them, and they have pulled apart the absurdity of so many parts of Australian politics. And this time, what they did was criticise the Australian Electoral Commission, which has come under fire in recent years because they do have an issue with securing the voting process. That's why they were passing legislation earlier this year in January and February to start to reform the voting. And so what happened basically is One Nation put up this cartoon, which there's a hilarious part there where the bat jumps out of the soup and upset all the ABC people, but we'll get to that later. But when they criticised the AEC, they came and demanded that Twitter take down this ad and YouTube and Facebook, and they relentlessly pursued the social media companies to do so. So I went on a bit of a trolling exercise for the rest of the afternoon, and I got them to admit in print that the ad did not break the Electoral Act at all. They just decided that it was their job to enforce what they consider to be misinformation, even though their own website and their own review admits that there are people who vote more than once. And if you've ever been to an Australian election, you will know and you will hear all the young people handing out how to vote cards saying, vote early, vote often, because they don't check your ID at the polls.
Yeah, vote early and vote often is a time-honoured joke, but apparently you can't make it anymore. That's fantastic. So we were talking about harmfulness, which is the new standard on the internet, if you put something potentially harmful up on the internet, then people are going to take it down. I don't even see this. This is the Australian Electoral Commission we're talking about. And I don't think they're actually, I understand there's all kinds of identity groups now. You've got, your gays and lesbians and transgenders and all kinds of people. But an Australian Election Commission person isn't actually a recognised identity group that you can be discriminatory against, is it? It's not Australian Election Commission phobia.
No, by harmful, what they mean is that they are being criticised. They don't like criticism. I'm pretty certain that account is run by some millennial with too much time online, because the way they reply to other tweets is absolutely hilarious. You have a lot of fun if you're bored late at night. But what I thought was interesting is there's one group there called First Draft, which they think it's their appointed right to monitor information about the Australian election online. And they had a quote about this video. I just want to quickly read it to you because it exposes what's really going on here. They said that the One Nation ad campaign had weaponized the use of satire and parody to create hatefulness and division. Now, I'm sorry, there was nothing hateful about addressing mail-in voting problems. And as far as divisive goes, it's an election. It's politics. It is divisive by its very nature. You shouldn't be divided in politics.
Yeah, no, you are absolutely. I don't think it's any business. If you can't be divisive, why have an election? Why have a multi-party system? I mean, that's where these guys are moving towards. That Pauline Hanson's party, this One Nation party, are basically having sport. This weaponizing satire. Satire has been weaponized since the Greeks. That's the idea that no one weaponized satire until Pauline Hanson came along is preposterous.
Let me tell you what happened. Basically, One Nation and a few of the other parties are called freedom-friendly parties. They ran on freedom to choose a vaccine or not choose a vaccine, freedom to work without vaccine mandates. That was their whole thing. And the Electoral Office, the AEC, has banned workers who are not vaccinated from working for the AEC. And when they were criticised for that, they said, oh, well, it's not political for us, even though it's one of the most political issues there is. So they have become a sort of politicised entity, and now they're policing speech and criticism against themselves. But this is part of a wider push from governments and bureaucracies to control online truth. You've seen what happened in America. As soon as Elon Musk bought Twitter, the first thing they do is create a Ministry of Truth. And I've always said that if your government says that free speech is a threat to democracy, well, then you live in a dictatorship, because a Ministry of Truth does not exist to protect it's there to protect the lies of government. It's not there to police the truth of public thought. That's the only reason they have one.
No, that's all well said, Alexandra. When I was there a couple of years ago, and I was very opposed to whatever it is, Section 17 or whatever in the Free Speech Code, because I just got rid of the equivalent thing in Canada. But it now looks like there's actually a huge long list of institutions, including the Electoral Committee. It's not just some passage in the criminal code. You've actually got to get rid of the Election Commission because they're behaving totalitarianism. It's just a terrible thing. And we thank you for keeping us up to speed on it, because whatever they're doing in America or Australia or wherever, sooner or later it lands here. We all cross-pollinate on this. Thank you very much, Alexandra. Stump the Steyn is looming. You can email me, gbviews@gbnews. Thane Gustafsson. And those big ticket items in your family budget. Hold your horses. We're coming right back.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Of people across the UK are heading to the polls in a vital test of Boris Johnson's premiership. This isn't just about Westminster, these are local elections. A chance for you to decide how your community is run. We'll be talking to senior politicians, election analysts, our team of reporters around the country, and of course to our team here in the studio. And we'll have comprehensive coverage of the elections to the Northern Irish Assembly. That's the UK Votes 2022. From 10 a.m. on Friday morning, here on GB News, the People's News Channel.
The so-called President of Europe, Ursula von der Leyen, has now called for a total ban on Russian oil imports to the EU. Frau von der Leyen says Russian supply of crude oil will be entirely prohibited within 6 months. So that's November. And refined products will be gone by the end of the year. So that's December. Regardless of who wins the war in Ukraine, it's pretty clear that the average EU citizen will be the loser when he fills up his Renault Clio. Joining me now is one of the world's leading experts on this subject, Professor Thane Gustafsson of Georgetown University. People all over the Western world, in America, in Britain, Australia, Europe, they're all worried about cost of living. How tightly, and in your country in particular, the price at the pump, you look at it when you go on your way to work, and then when you come back, it's gone up 27 cents while you were sitting in your office for 8 hours. So what's the connection between people suffering with fuel poverty, as they call it, and what's going on with Russian-Western relations?
There are two things going on, Mark. In the background is all of the disruptions from the COVID-19 pandemic. And that had brought together what people have been calling a perfect storm. Some of them freak events that have nothing to do with COVID-19 or with the war in Russia. But there's no question but that the outbreak of the war since February 24th has made energy markets extremely nervous over the prospect of further shortages. In round numbers, Russia is exporting 8 million barrels a day out of a world total of maybe about 100 million barrels a day. And it's also providing some 55% of gas exports to Europe and in particular to Germany. So that's enough to make energy markets extremely nervous, and particularly in Europe.
Are there actually any really easy replacements for what Russia's shipping west every day?
Only over time, Mark. Let's take gas first. Germany in particular is highly dependent on the gas imports. It depends industry by industry. The chemical industry is particularly vulnerable to the prospect of an interruption of supplies. Other sectors less so. France, of course, relies very largely on nuclear power for its electricity, and consequently it's less affected. Italy is probably in second place right after Germany. And the closer you get to the east, the more dependent those countries are. Hungary has no easy replacement now or even later for Russian gas.
What about this new wrinkle that's been added since the sanctions were introduced in late February, which is that Moscow wants people to pay in rubles? Is that likely to catch on in any big way?
That's being firmly resisted by the European gas buyers. They are all extremely uncomfortable over the prospect of paying for rubles. So this has led to a negotiation that gets very geeky in a hurry. The idea being that the Western buyers can continue to pay either in euros or in dollars, but we then have a workaround arranged through a bank that's controlled by Gazprom. A Gazprom bank then turns the euros and dollars into rubles and pays those into Gazprom. All of that, I think, to save face really on something that the Kremlin probably rather regrets that it raised in the first place. But the idea is to maintain the exchange rate of the ruble.
Yeah, which is basically back to where it was before the war started. I do understand. I think it was the South Africans who actually agreed to pay in rubles. So there are people out there who are willing to go along with it. What do you think, on the other hand, of Frau von der Leyen's targets basically to be for the entire European Union, which is whatever it is, however many are left since the UK got out, to be off Russian oil and gas by the end of the year? Is that doable?
That's not doable. Various think tanks have done careful studies. Again, it depends on the sector. The chemical industry, again, being the most vulnerable. But most of the gas in Europe, and particularly Germany, because Germany is really at ground zero of what we're talking about here, most of the gas is used for home heating. Now, there's no way that can be replaced quickly. Ultimately, that will be electrified. People will rely on heat pumps, but that's 10 years away. You have an enormous stock of existing housing that can't be converted overnight. So various propositions hold that you can free Europe of 2/3 of its dependence on the roughly 155 billion cubic meters that Europe takes every year. You could bring in more LNG from the United States, but world supplies are tight, and there's a lot of competition for LNG from places elsewhere, such as China, that may need it. And so you will get, at a minimum, an increase in prices.
Yep, and China will have its own interests to pursue if it thinks it can take Russian energy and leave the Europeans shivering. This issue is going to stay with us all year, basically, if only just to see whether Madame von der Leyen's targets are met. But already it's over 5 million people in the UK who are in so-called fuel poverty. Thank you very much, Professor Gustafsson. Great to see you again. We're going to stump it out here. Let's see what question. Where are we going here? Why is our government throwing £100 million, says Charlie, our reserve stocks of weapons and all its political capital at a faraway invasion in Eastern Europe when we have our own invasion to deal with right here on the coast of Kent? I couldn't agree with you more. Couldn't agree with you more, Charlie. And all normal people think like that. Whatever you feel about the Ukraine border, a government's principal responsibility is to the borders of the nation it purports to govern. But basically, ever since Tony Blair, wars are about not having any legitimate national interest in. So Tony Blair was the great warmonger for places that there was no national interest in. And actually, going along with that, the national interest, a nation is no longer permitted to have a national interest. So how many days do we have to have hundreds, how many months, how many years do you have to have hundreds and hundreds of people arriving on the shores of southern England before you have utterly transformed your nation? You know, we're broke. There's no £100 million. We're going to be paying off the stupid lockdown until the next century. So we're now spending money that the government will not have until the 22nd century. That's how diseased and decadent we are. Let us see. What are we? Let's. That's it. We're all out of time. What am I talking about? Our pal and yours, Dan Wootton, is wiggling out of the watershed to wallop your Wednesday. Don't miss a minute of it. Stay safe, stay free.
Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update. A warmer day for most tomorrow and a fine day as well, generally dry and bright with sunny spells. There will be, as always, one or two exceptions. Certainly it's been far from dry today. These weather fronts bringing quite a lot of showers through the afternoon and evening across eastern England, but they are all slipping away. And behind it, high pressure is trying to move in, but these weather fronts are also moving in and they'll bring some patchy rain tonight over parts of Northern Ireland for a time and certainly across western Scotland. The showers in eastern England, they are fading. So generally across England and Wales, it'll be a dry night. Might see a bit of mist and fog